AnswerThePublic.com, something we talked about in the last episode. How cool is that? So what you're saying to me is, let's say I'm a plumber. Plumbers are like, how can I use social media? I twist wrenches to stop leaks. And the answer is, well, you type in plumber, basement, flooding, or something like that. Like here in Madison, Wisconsin last year, we had very bad flooding, a lot of flooded basements, and a ton of questions undoubtedly flying through, cyberspace about how do I deal with mold in my basement or whatever. You don't know that could be a fantastic question for you to be answering right now during the flooding event on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. If you don't go to a tool like this and find out that, oh my gosh, a lot of people are asking about this. So if you're a plumber, you can use a tool like that for your social efforts.
Yeah. So I know, like I touched on last week, there are an almost endless number of keyword tools that you can use to do this kind of research. If you want, for example, up to the minute information or very current stuff, what this will give you is really an overview of what people search in general, maybe not at that exact moment, as it pertains to those keywords. So if I were a plumber, I would probably start by making a list of the services that I offer. So maybe it's, sinks, toilets, water heaters, pools, air conditioners, kind of run through the list of things that I fixed. And I would plug each of those in there to see, because people are going to be asking, for example, let's pick something silly, right? So toilet, probably the most common thing. We all have one in our home, and this is something that occasionally needs to be fixed. So if you were to type in toilet and see what are the keywords that people are searching around that, probably one of the most common ones you're going to find, I think, is something many of us have experienced. Why is my toilet running? You may hear, if you listen carefully, my own toilet running in the background down the hall, right? This is a very common problem. So this is the kind of thing that you might be inclined to call a plumber for. But how do you know if it's a problem or not? So seeing those questions, how long does the toilet run? How do I fix the toilet running? How do you know if that's the problem? You're going to find a lot of related searches for just that one issue. Now you add in that the toilet may be leaking, or that it's not flushing properly, or that the water pressure is low, or that the flush doesn't have enough water in. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, and I'm no plumber. So as you start to look at some of these questions, as an expert in your field, you are going to have ideas for tutorials you can give people for, how to identify problems, for key terms they need to know, what to look for, photo walkthroughs of how to do certain things. Because what you're able to do is educate them to make them a better customer. How much easier would it be as a plumber if someone called you up and said, I looked at your website and it looks like thingamajig number 4 is a little bit loose, so I'm going to need you to come down and help me fix that, as opposed to getting a phone call that says, I don't know, there's something weird happening to my toilet, and you have no idea what you're walking into. If you can give people the education they need to be a better customer for you, to be a better listener, a better viewer, a better subscriber, a better reader, whatever that is, giving them that educational content in some way through a blog post, a Facebook Live, a video, something, you allow yourself to do your own work better. So it kind of is a win-win.
Well, this reminds me of a talk that I saw Marcus Sheridan do at Social Media Marketing World in 2018. Mm-hmm. And he went through a little bit of his story, and plus or minus some of the facts I might embellish or debellish, if that's a word, some of them. But my understanding is he started by sitting in his basement office, I think it was a Sunday evening, with a video camera. And all he did is turn to the camera and tell the audience that wasn't there the difference between a fiberglass pool and a poured concrete pool or something like that, because he's the pool guy, right? He was a sales guy for a pool company, in-ground pool, I think, and all that. So all he did was take a very simple FAQ, frequently asked question, and he answered it. My understanding, I haven't checked it out lately, but my understanding is that video is still up on YouTube. And that video is the video that was the face of Helen that launched 1,000 ships for his career and his empire. I mean, seriously, Marcus Sheridan, if you don't follow Marcus Sheridan, you should, because he's really powerful, inspirational, and a really good guy. Highly recommended. That frequently asked question gave him a whole new business and a whole new career and a worldwide following. He didn't stop with that one crappily produced video. He's now very sophisticated, but it all started by answering one simple, frequently asked question.
Exactly. So for him as a pool salesperson, he's knowing he has that regular contact with his audience. So he's hearing the exact questions and objections that his audience would have, right? Well, I don't know what kind of pool to get, or I don't know anything about fiberglass pools. What even is fiberglass? How do I know which one's right for me? What if I'm doing in ground or above ground? Do I need to buy a tarp? Do I need to fence it in? He knows those questions that are coming to him as a salesperson, and knows that if he can create content that answers those questions, he's going to create customers out of his potential customers, because they will then have the information they need. Imagine someone coming into your phone call or coming into your follow-up phone call once you've shared some resources with all the answers they already have. You don't have to spend that time selling anymore. You can spend that time getting the sale done because they're already sold. They already have the info they need. And so it makes it a lot easier, because you're able to have those sales assets, those content pieces on call, on tap, ready to send as soon as someone has a question.
You can quote me on this. I believe it to be true, and I'm going to say it like I know it to be true. There's more money in answering a frequently asked question than there is in coming up with this brilliant new spark of a blog post. Why? Because everyone on YouTube is typing in, how do I stop my leaky toilet? Mm-hmm. If you answer that question and you answer it with enough people saying, hey, this is really great. I don't know about you. When I look on YouTube, the first thing I do is look at number of views, because if it's got a ton of views, that means people found it valuable.
Yeah.
And that's the one I go to. So
right.
If you answer that question, you can save yourself a whole lot of time when you're struggling to come up with that guru level brilliance that no one wants to read anyway, because they're not looking for that.
And it's so interesting, because I know there's one listener, I can almost hear them right now saying, but I am a plumber, and if I teach people how to fix their running toilet, how will I get any business, right? So I do feel like we should probably address that. It's another fellow marketing speaker who, I don't know if you've had him here on the podcast, but he's certainly been at conferences that we've both been at, Jay Baer. He has the famous quote of saying, you have to give away information snacks to sell knowledge meals. So give away information snacks to sell knowledge meals. And what it means is you've got to give people a free sample to come in, because I don't know you're a plumber yet. I don't know if I can trust you as a plumber yet. But if you've helped me, if you've given me some helpful information, the second thing that happens after you pick the most viewed video and you watch it is, generally speaking, you go, oh, I don't think I could actually do that, or I don't have that fancy tool that he's using, or I don't have 2 hours to get this done before I need to go pick my kids up from soccer practice. So oftentimes the first step is seeing a process, understanding what needs to be done, and then we often have to take that extra step to get someone else to do it. And who better than the one who tried to show you? You already know they know how to do it. So, some people sure may take that step, but there's a good chance that if I'm handy enough to fix the running toilet this time, I may not be handy enough to fix the next thing that goes wrong, when my sink is leaking or my garbage disposal's not working or whatever comes next. And I will remember, oh, there's that really smart plumber guy, that really smart plumber gal that I listened to the podcast or watched their video or walked through that FAQ, and I know they know what they're doing now. So I'm going to call them for this problem.
Well, and just to put my own spin on exactly what Jay Baer was saying, and people who follow Gary Vaynerchuk will recognize jab, 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 right hook. I'm saying put deposits in every customer, every person you know's bank of goodwill. And every little time you help someone out, give them a hint, take a little bit of load off them, you're putting a deposit in their bank. And guess what? The more deposits you make, the more return you're going to get from those deposits, exactly as you laid out, Melanie, so brilliantly. So for those people who are afraid of giving away the farm, understand, no. You're letting people have an apple off that farm. And they're going to come get a bushel of apples when they need it, because they know you make good apples. You grow good apples.
Yeah.
How do you like them apples?
I love it. It really is exactly like the sample cart. I think almost everyone has had that experience, right? Whether you're at a conference or at the grocery store or the big box store, you try a sample of something and your brain, you're just thinking, I got something for free, right? And you try it and you're like, oh, wait, that is really good. And I actually do think I need some of that cheese now, or I need some of that juice now. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is to say, you want this, you need this. Go home with this. And so we can do the same thing with free samples of our content. And as you said, if you've already got FAQ on your website, if you've already got, basic product descriptions on your website, why not take it to the next level? Make it a little easier to find, easier to navigate, make it something that people discover on purpose, and then they're going to come back to you time and again.
In advertising, one of the key things advertising is supposed to do is drive trial. Get people to try something. Yep. Well, if you're already giving it to them, they're trying it and they don't even know it. All they know is that, wow, that was really helpful. Therefore, when I think of you, I think of helpful. Maybe helpful becomes valuable after you give enough trial, and all of a sudden valuable becomes, I got to have that. We've got to tap into that in a more meaningful way. So again, looking at your website where you offer people the opportunity to talk to you for a minute for $5, you can blow up into a $25,000 consulting contract pretty darn quickly because you've allowed them that J Bear nibble to get the full Melanie Diesel meal.
Yeah. And, it's a different topic. Some people do the Pick My Brain thing for free. I was doing that for a while, and I was finding that it wasn't actually converting. And what I have found is ever since I started charging a smaller amount, not doing the Pick My Brain call for free, it actually converts at a much higher rate, because by the time someone is willing to make that smaller investment, that they're going to have their stuff together. We're going to have a much more productive phone call, and it's much more likely for me to lead to a longer term relationship where I can help them on an ongoing basis. But you hit on something a second ago that I think ties back to our conversation last week. You talked about, people will see you as helpful. Last week we were talking about, trying to decide what's important for you in your life and architecting your life and your business choices around that. I think you can very much architect the way your brand comes to life on content and through content by asking yourself how you want your customers to see you, what's important to your customers. So, thinking, for me, for example, I do want people to see me and my brand as creative, as helpful. Those are two words that I work really hard on, creative and helpful. Those are two ways that I want to be seen. And what that means is I make choices about the content I create as creative, like we talked a little bit about the podcast details page last week, right? That's kind of a creative solution for that. But I also want to be helpful. So I also have free Content Idea Friday videos on YouTube. Now, if you go look for those, I'm sorry, they're not updated. In the interest of full transparency, I struggle to feed all the content machines all by myself because I am still a shop of one. But I do try to put out content, as often as I can that is going to help the audience in some way to help feed those two words. So I would really recommend, as you're building your own brand, to think about what are those words, whether it's helpful, creative, innovative, intelligent, whatever those words are that you and your brand, you want to be described as. How am I bringing those words to life through content?
Well, House Stark may be always about winter is coming and the Lannisters are all about paying their debts. I'm here to say that DP Knudten's all about three words: creative, collaborator, and provocative. And they speak for themselves. Hopefully I'm provoking, with the help of Melanie Diesel, some really great ideas in your head. But I want to underline one of the things you just said, which is, you're my social media spirit animal, and I say that with all transparency and openness. I'm drafting off your, changing metaphors, I'm drafting off your race car right on the bumper, even though you may be 25 laps ahead of me, because you're doing it so well. But guess what, listeners? She just confessed she's struggling to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
Filling the maw of the beast that is social media. So if you're killing it and having trouble, everybody should be okay with having trouble with it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that social media and honestly just digital media in general does for us is give us this sense that we are supposed to be able to do superhuman things. And if we can't, we are insufficient people. And that's really sad. So, to honestly expect myself to be able to be a healthy person, to operate my home and take care of the logistical things of my human life that I must, to travel to speak, to run a consulting business, to post regularly and strategically and create original content for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and everywhere, YouTube and everywhere else, is downright silly. I am just a human. I have the same amount of hours in a day as anyone else. And so there are places where I make intentional sacrifices, knowing that there are some places it's very easy for me to do my best work. I love Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter because jotting off a quick thought, reading news and reacting to it is something that's very easy and quick. So I do that while I'm in line, while I'm waiting for the bus, while I'm eating a meal, right? If I'm by myself and not in the company of people I'd rather make eye contact with. LinkedIn is something that for me is very scheduled. And I know that there are some people who are all in on LinkedIn, creating original live video every day. That's not me. That's not what fits with my worldview right now. It's not what fits with my schedule right now. So my LinkedIn is fairly scheduled, but it does the trick. My Instagram, I don't update it as much as I used to because I find it harder to create original content when I'm not traveling as much. I don't have as many new and wonderful things to look at when I'm not traveling. So it's harder to say, here's my coffee again today. But I try. And so acknowledging those limitations, I call it your first content language. You know what your first content language is. It's the thing that you speak in most easily. And that might be writing. It might be audio. It might be video. Lean into that and do that really well. And then do your best in some of the other places and let it be. Because there's no one out there who's a single individual who is seamlessly and strategically and consistently updating all of these platforms and still managing to live a sane, healthy life. So unburden yourself of that aim. It's not realistic for you. You're going to burn yourself out and still not feel satisfied. So choose where to focus your efforts. Focus on the things that you are strongest in your first content language and acknowledge that some of the others, you might just not update your YouTube channel for a little bit and that'll be okay. Nobody died.
Well, that's great advice. And if I can tack anything onto that, it would be stop looking for a guru and try to find a number of guides who are doing what you do, who inspire you to do it. And maybe you can borrow some of the techniques and tips and hacks and tricks they're using and putting them in your own words with your own content and your own style and do it that way. Because there's, as you say, there is no one person who's doing it 100% right. The best guides are doing what they do incredibly well. This episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast is brought to you by Nonfiction Brandversity. It's a free Facebook group dedicated to the art and craft of personal branding, and we'd like to invite you. Just search Nonfiction Brandversity on Facebook and ask to join. You're in, guaranteed. I can't wait to see you on campus. I love that whole first content language concept because there are people who are like, I don't ever want to be on camera. Guess what? You don't have to be on camera. There are plenty of people. There are plenty of people who are fantastic at short, little, cogent thoughts. Boom, Twitter might be your first language. So even within the realm of written word, you can even get more special than that. You could be, Twitter's my jam. Blogging, longer form, is my jam.
Writing books.
Or videos, or you name it. Yeah, exactly. Hey, before we go, I want to talk to listeners or let listeners know something that I learned from you that is really kind of fun, that I learned from Melanie's talk at Social Media Marketing World 2019. She did this great talk about essentially creating content to fill the maw of that social media beast in a very, I don't want to say scheduled, but kind of categorized out. Everything's, it's very, I don't want to say paint by number because that's a little too simplified, but it's got this level of simplicity to it because you created this grid of concept ideas and variations and all that stuff. And then you gave a tip that made me laugh, but I loved, and that is dig out your old D&D kit, find a multi-sided die, and sit there and roll the dice to see what you're going to post today based on the matrix that you created.
Yeah.
It's kind of like row 5, go over to column 2, and whoa, we're doing a quiz today.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So the talk that you were talking about is the promise I made, I believe, was 300 plus content ideas in 45 minutes or something outrageous like
right.
that. Yeah. But it fills a room, but to be fair, we delivered on it. So what I propose is that, a big reason that we find content ideas and coming up with content ideas very intimidating is that it feels like this magical thing that you're just supposed to know how to do. And if you can't sit down and do it, then something's wrong with you, right? The reality is we need a framework. We sit down and say, I need ideas. We're trying to pull something from nothing. So what we need is guides like you talked about. So what I came up with is that it's a matrix, as you talked about, a grid, right? And it's 10 by 10. Across the top of it are formats, and that or focuses. So this is what your content is about. For example, it's about history. It's about a person. It's about steps in a process. down the side of it, those 10 rows, those are the formats. So this is how we bring our content to life. So it's a video, it's a piece of written content, it's audio content, it's a map or a timeline or a slideshow. And the process that you talked about with the die, the idea is you don't have to make exactly what you come up with first, but it will get your brain going and thinking in the right direction. So if we roll that die and we say, oh, we need to tell history through audio. Could we do that about our product? Could we tell the history of our product through audio? What might that look like? Now, maybe that's a bad idea, right? Maybe we think it through and we're like, I just don't think there's good enough sound with our particular industry. Cool, roll again. What if we told our history through a quiz? Well, that would be fun. Why don't we quiz our audience and see how well they know the history of our industry or the history of our company, right? So you kind of start prompting your brain and giving yourself these guidelines to think of content in new ways. And the wonderful thing about this content matrix, which we'll give you the link, you guys can download a version of this. Now that you've heard the explanation, the download of the matrix will be useful for you. But the wonderful thing about this is you can adapt it to fit your needs. If you can't work on some of these formats, you don't have the time, money, or resources to make a map, to make video, simply remove those columns. Make your own grid that's going to include the focuses and formats that work best for you and roll the die in whatever way you need to end up within those confines. So you can give yourself the assignment to work through a column a day or a row a day to kind of stretch your brain. You can roll a die and just keep trying random combinations. You could sit down and say, I'm going to try to complete this whole grid in the next hour and see what you come up with. So it's just a great way to kind of get those cylinders firing and give yourself some guidelines for coming up with content ideas. And if you are interested in that, you can get that at storyfuel.co, so storyfuel.co/content matrix. So it's exactly what we talked about. There you will find the content matrix. Just enter your email and we will send you a download so you can get that, as well as some worksheet versions of it that do allow you to fill in the blanks and test out your own brain.
Let me tell you, the whole content matrix works. And not only that, but the title of your talk worked. Because, I went to a bunch of talks at Social Media Marketing World and, most of them had 50 to 60% attendance. I could not get into your talk until someone left because it was jam-packed. And why was it so full? 300 content ideas in 45 minutes. Did you have your finger on the pulse of what the people who came to that conference wanted to know about? I think so. Yeah. And that's an example of what I would call an FAQ style talk. It wasn't some lofty concept. It was, this is how you can do this. Mm-hmm. And it was cut and dried and clear as crystal clear water. And people were thirsty for it. And that place was packed.
If we were making the content matrix talk out of the content matrix itself, I think it would be a step-by-step, so a DIY, right? Because we were walking people through all of those 10 options on each side. And then it would be an infographic because we plotted it in a graphic way. So I joke about this in the talk that once you see the matrix, that it's always just a focus. We're talking about something and it's a format. How are we bringing it to life? You start to, at least I do, I don't know, maybe I'm a weirdo. I start to see the matrix everywhere and I'm like, aha, a classic 3-7 combination. You start to see it because it really is so simple. It's just our brains needed that structure to really think about brainstorming in a different way.
Structures like that are the foundation that every good writer uses. Let's not even get into the talk about Joseph Campbell and the monomyth or the hero's journey and how there are so many marketing people who are making their livelihoods right now doing nothing but ripping off Joseph Campbell and putting it in an advertising wrapper as some type of novel concept. Do not get me started about that. But let me tell you, it's always delightful to have Melanie Diesel on the podcast because guess what? You just heard it over the past 2 weeks. Tons of great ideas, tons of great hints and tips that are actionable, as well as a few concepts that are worth chewing on for a period of time. That's what I love about Melanie, and that's why I'm going to ask you to be a frequent guest on this podcast, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Let's give everybody that URL to get the content matrix again.
Absolutely. So it's storyfuel.co/content matrix. If you go to the regular website, you just go to storyfuel.co. You'll also find that link at the very bottom of the site. It's in the footer, so you can't get lost as long as you find yourself on storyfuel.co.
It's worth the download for sure. And Melanie is worth the follow every flippin' day. I'm telling you, quality content, quality human being, and soon to be a quality mama.
Can't wait.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you and your husband. Congratulations. I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast and let you go, Melanie, but I do want to remind people that you can always join Nonfiction Brandversity, the free Facebook group, simply by searching Nonfiction Brandversity on Facebook and ask to join. You're in. The other thing I'd like to ask you to do is to like, subscribe, refer, and review this podcast so that other people can find it. Well, that's all for today. I'm DP Knudten, and she is
Melanie Diesel.
And I'll see you next time, or you'll hear me next time on the Nonfiction Brand podcast. Bye-bye.